one of the things we can do with that as a medium is we can help spirit to cross. So we can go in, we can light a candle, we can call forth their loved ones in spirit, and we can ask them to go with their loved one in spirit to the other side.
Welcome to the Story of Spirit podcast, where practical spirituality meets real life. Hi, I'm your host, Sheetal Story. I'm a psychic medium, grief support counselor, professional astrologer, and a human design reader, and of course, a law of attraction master coach. With my unique blend of spiritual and practical tools, I am here to help you align with your soul-led purpose and ignite a life that sets your soul on fire. In this podcast, we are going to explore the principles of energy, astrology, spirituality, and psychology to help you heal your grief and create an aligned life and business from the inside out. Whether you are looking to deepen your intuition, understand your cosmic design, or transform your business, this podcast is for you. Join me each week for insightful discussions, practical tips, and inspiring stories that will guide you on your journey to living your very best life. Don't forget to subscribe and follow us on Instagram at Sheetal Story or wherever you listen to this podcast. Let's dive in and start this transformative journey together. Welcome to the Story of Spirit podcast.
Horror Stories from a Psychic, Part 2. So if you haven't listened to Part 1, I would encourage you to go back to last week's episode where I recorded Part 1. And to kind of preface, I have a lot of stories about spirit, hauntings, possessions, things like that isn't often talked about in mainstream society. And if you haven't traveled the world or had experiences with such things, then you wouldn't really know that these things existed. And I think Hollywood likes to talk about them because they make a really great story, don't they? I actually had a mediumship mentor where he's like, this stuff isn't real, Sheetal. And I said, you haven't gone to Asia. You haven't actually had any experiences in parts of the world where this stuff is actually very, very real. And I have actually seen firsthand experiences with it myself on those things. So I always want to bring information with it. This isn't just a horror story to scare you and you now are like, oh my God, I can't turn out the light. Like, that's not what I'm about. I want to bring light to the darkness and help you understand what is happening, how does energy work, and the spirituality, yes, the energy behind it, spirit, the mediumship kind of portion of it as well, and to really help you kind of think through these things on your own. So I did talk about something sort of taboo in the last one, which was curses. In this one, I want to talk about kind of hauntings, and we're going to touch on possession in a very benign way, so you can see what it actually is, right? So in the first story I wanted to share with you was when I was first moving here from Vancouver. So I grew up in Edmonton and went to school here, had a lot of friends here. My family is here. My husband's family is in Edmonton. And then we moved to Vancouver for jobs and had a wonderful time living that part of our life. We got married and then we had our first child. And our first child required a lot of support. We didn't want to raise him without our family around. And he also had some medical things that we really required support with the family to navigate those. So when we were moving back to Edmonton, I was bringing my baby with me, and my husband was there trying to wrap things up with the house and job and things like that. So I had traveled here. My mom was babysitting my son, and I traveled out with a realtor, and the realtor came highly recommended from our mortgage broker in BC. So when I was riding around with her, I had a certain type of criteria. I was looking for a very specific kind of house. And I knew that likely we were coming back to Edmonton at the height of the boom as well, which was so unfortunate. So although we had just purchased a home in Vancouver, it was a condo, a townhouse condo. To flip it for a home here was like we were really scraping the bottom of the barrel of like new builds kind of thing. So we were looking around at the different areas of the city, and as I was traveling around with her, I had sort of said to her, I'm a pretty spiritual person. Now, at this time, remember, my gifts had not opened up to me again. So I had them as a child, but in my now 30s, I just had my first son, so I had just turned 30. And it wasn't until I had my second child that my gifts opened up. And that was around 33 at that time. So this time, although I'm a spiritual person, I come from a spiritual family, I'm not aware yet of my gifts as a medium or the ability that I have to connect with departed loved ones on the other side. So, but I am still a spiritual person. So in my culture, which is I'm East Indian, and by religion, I'm Hindu. And in Hinduism, we always sort of bless the house. It's part of our culture. Whenever you buy a new house, you bless the house, you bring the priest in, you light, we have our version of sage, which is called sambrani, and we'll light that and smoke out the house kind of thing. Holy water everywhere, things like that. And we invite everyone to bring blessings and food and fill the house with love and light and intention that the house brings abundance and success and joy to everyone who enters it. So it's really a beautiful ceremony that I have lived with and grew up with. And then since meeting my husband, every apartment we ever lived in, we never really did that because it wasn't ours. And then even when we bought our home in Vancouver, we didn't have a housewarming, which I thought was interesting because it is part of my culture. But I think we were just so excited to be moving in. We were pregnant. It was just a lot going on. My mom did come. My mom and dad did come, and they did bless the house and did their thing, which was lovely. And it does change the energy of the house. So if you think about energy is, you can intention energy, right? So as soon as I think about you and I send prayers and love to you, that energy is already en route to you, and you might even feel it, right? If I think that you have a horrible haircut and I can't believe you wore that thing, that energy is also going to you. So if you don't have any protections in terms of a barrier or, white light boundary, as we do in Intuition 101, or bless the house and surround the house with love and light, then you can be a sort of, just subject to random, and who wants random? No one wants random. So we intention energy, and that is what sort of a housewarming is. And so when I was traveling with the realtor, I said to the realtor, do you believe in haunted houses? And she said, depends on what you believe. Of course, right? There's a lot of professions out there that if you say something that doesn't jive with me, I can probably fire you right away because, there are people out there that don't believe in such things. And if she was to say, yes, I do, then I might say we're not compatible to work together. So I've noticed a lot of caution, in certain industries, and real estate is one of them. So she's like, well, it depends on what you believe. And I said, I bet you have had some really interesting experiences with houses and homes because people, leave the energy of them behind, right? You're leaving energy you're imprinting your energy in a home. So when you live in a home, that energy of you stays in the home until you clear it, right? So because your energy imprints into the walls, into the carpet. So if you've had a wonderful experience in a home, so when we entered into this home that we're in now, it was the second home that we moved into when we moved back to Edmonton. I could feel the love in this house. I could just feel, and the family who built this house was a family. They had boys. They were very loving. We got to meet the owners themselves. They were so wonderful. They helped us understand some of the things in the home so we could, seamlessly sort of take it over and care for the home as well. They really meticulously cared for the home as well. And I could feel that as soon as I walked into this house. So you can feel, there's energy of spaces and places. And there's certain places you can walk into and it doesn't feel so good, right? And so we call that sort of the energy. We can sort of feel the energy of objects. That's called psychometry because you can imprint your energy onto objects. So let's say I'm wearing a ring. This is my ring. It's my favorite. I bought it. I bought it from the person who created it. And now that I wear it so often, it has my energy in it, right? You think of heirlooms. When you get an heirloom, you would then have the energy of that person in the heirloom. If you don't know the person or you don't like the person, now you've got this energy with you and you're like, well, that's not my energy. With this ring, if I was to pass and my ring went to one of my children, then every time my child wore my ring, they would feel me and there would be a resonance and they would feel that they were close to me because they really are. That is my energy. So when you're in a home and you have a home, it's the same thing. Your energy imprints into the home. So I said to the realtor, you must have had some interesting experiences. And she said, yep. And I said, tell me the worst one. I want to know. And she's like, are you sure? And I said, yeah, I'm not squeamish about such things. I know I'm fully protected. I don't have to, it's not. And if I go into a house and I feel like something's not right, I'm not buying the house. So I just want you to know that you might find everything in my criteria, but if there's something off energetically in the home, I'm not going to buy it. And for that reason as well, I won't buy a home that's underneath power lines, because power lines affect the magnetic field of us as humans. And I realize not everybody has that ability to choose a house that's not under a power line or is not sensitive to energy, and they're fine living under a power line. And that's why people live under power lines and they build houses under power lines. And that's fine. There's no judgment to you if you live under a power line. Okay, so I just want to say that. And really, I'm going to say that for the entire podcast, all the episodes. And there's no judgment for you. I'm just sharing for you what I have experienced and maybe my own beliefs in this. This podcast represents my beliefs, right? It might not be a reality for you. That's fine. So I don't want to live under a power line. I don't live near a power station, and I'm very sensitive to energy. So even going through those at the airport, those scanners that go all the way around you, I really don't like it. But I found every time I opt out of that, it becomes a big deal and people get mad, and then I'm waiting and stuff. So I just kind of grin and bear it. But I always ask Spirit. It always works out that the line goes, something happens and it clogs up, or somebody needs to go through that has a stroller or pacemaker, and then they open up the other line to walk through the old school metal detectors, and I end up going through those. So that doesn't bother me as much, but it feels like it rattles in my teeth. Like I'm a little sensitive to energy. So my realtor says to me, okay, so here's a story for you. Before I did real estate, while I was working on my real estate license, I used to do property appraisals for the bank. And I would do them on foreclosures to help get them ready to go to market or to go to auction or whatever, however the bank would try to utilize the asset and get the money back on the foreclosure. So she said, I've been to many houses where I saw, interesting ways people lived, and they would sort of vacate and clear out everything. And then she would go see the empty house, give an appraisal on the house as is. And then if they did anything kind of minor or had to clear up or clean out anything, maybe if that would change the property value of the home. But really it's as is. She went to a very big property. It was in the middle of town, and it had been sort of an older house. Had been there for a while. It was a very lucrative property, so the bank was very eager to get this appraised. So she took the job, got paid for it, and when she walked in, she said right away I could feel that something was just off. Right, just had this feeling of it's not quite right. And on the main level, it was the kitchen and the living room. And it was one of those old houses, so lots of sort of compartmental, walls and things blocking and dividing up things. And she said she could feel, it felt like someone was watching her, but she knew she was the only person in the house. She actually went and even did a check and knew that she was the only person in the house. She even closed the front door and locked it from the inside. So she went up the stairs to the second floor, and the second floor had all the rooms, all the bedrooms, and there's quite a few. And she noticed that of the bedrooms that would have been the children's ones, because they looked like they had sort of children type of like wallpaper and carpeting colors and things like that. It was a very old house, and those rooms had locks on the outside of the door. Outside. That means the lock on the outside was to keep somebody in. The person on the inside could not open the door or have free will to leave the room. They would be locked in the room. She thought that was very creepy, understandably so. When she went into one of the bedrooms and opened the door, she noticed that there was scratch marks on the inside. 5 finger sort of length scratch marks inside the door, like someone's clawing to try to get out but couldn't. That was also creepy. Then as she was kind of moving through the rooms, again, she felt like somebody was watching her, and she turned around and no one was in the hallway. Nothing was there. So she made her way to the third floor. The third floor was like an attic. And it was like if you watched Home Alone, the attic up there, and it was like a ladder to get up there. And so she got up to the third floor, and the third floor was like a playroom. So it would have been designed as like a rumpus room or a playroom, and it had wallpaper up that was like for children, and you can see that it had been used as a big kind of play space. And when she was there, she heard a scream in the house and a door slammed. And she ran out of that house. She said it was the last house she ever appraised. Got down the ladder, ran down the stairs, and out the front door, and slammed the door, locked it. And she said, I swore that there was a child watching me from the top window. And when she tried to look properly with the sun, it was gone. And she, at that point, had told the bank, I quit. I'm not going to be doing any more appraisals for you. She quickly got her real estate license, and she said she never looked back. She said there's nothing to explain that experience in other than like there was no one else in the house. She said I clear as day heard the scream and the door slammed. And when she ran down the stairs, it was one of the children's rooms that had slammed. No reason. The door was not off kilter, was not weighted weird. Like she looked at that before to sort of see how the doors were weighted and if they needed to be replaced. Not one door needed to be replaced like that. So then I asked her, because I'm curious, I was like, did you look into the history of the house and see what had happened there? Because I know even back then, even though I wasn't like into spirituality and understanding energy and imprints, I knew that something had happened in that house. I just knew, because a house like that doesn't just happen, right? It doesn't just like all of a sudden it's haunted. Like there's something happening there. And I'll explain the haunted piece in a moment. And she said, I did look into the history of the home. And I said, what did you find? And she looked at me kind of hesitant. And I said, it's fine. I'm totally fine with this stuff. And she said, a gentleman had killed his children and himself. So it was a murder-suicide. And they were trying to liquidate the home afterwards because there's no one to pay because everyone's dead. And I don't know what happened to the mother. And so there was an energy imprint in the home of severe tragedy and trauma. And that energy had imprinted. Now, was there a spirit of a child in that house? It's a possibility. And what happens so there's two types of energy. One is the energy of an imprint. So if there's a lot of bad things that happen in a home, what can happen is there can be that imprint of the energy in the home, and it can take on its own kind of wind. My mom used to call it. It's like a wind that just kind of is in the home. You can just feel it. It's not like a spirit. It's just the energy of the home as imprinted as an echo of the past. So you can just move into a house and have bad things, and you can just feel that, right? And that's that. Now, if there was, somebody that passed tragically and is connected to the home and feels like this is my home, then there could be what Hollywood likes to call a haunting, but I would say a spirit just that is home there, right? And sometimes they don't know that house isn't theirs anymore because they could be looping in a time in which that they felt like that was their home, right? So one of the things we can do with that as a medium is we can help spirit to cross. So we can go in, we can light a candle, we can call forth their loved ones in spirit, and we can ask them to go with their loved one in spirit to the other side. Now, if they are happy there, they don't want to cross, they feel like, no, this is fine, I like being here, I don't know what's on the other side, I'm not ready to go into the light, I just want to stay here. Remember, they have free will, so they can choose to stay in the home. Oftentimes I notice when I used to go and clear houses, I don't do that anymore. But when we go to clear houses, what happens, people would say there's something here, there's a spirit here. And 9 times out of 10, it would be one of their loved ones. It would be someone they knew in life, grandpa. I went to clear a home for a family friend, and their daughter was extremely clairvoyant and was seeing a man. And as I went to the home, I could see the man. I was like, oh, he's your husband's grandfather. And he was talking about some of the he gave some really specific details that I wouldn't know. And she was like, yes, oh my God, that's my grandfather. And he said that he comes to visit the little girl because he only got to see her as a baby and she can see him. And he's very excited by that because he's never had a chance to have a relationship with her. And I said, you're scaring the little girl. You can't come and like, she doesn't know who you are and she doesn't understand that you're her grandfather. So the little girl was there and I said, you see a tall man? And she said, yeah, he scares me. And I said, do you know he's your grandfather? I said, do you have a picture of her grandfather? And she brought the picture forward to show her. She's like, oh my God, that's the guy. I said, yes, that's him. I can see him. He's right here. He's very excited that you can see him because he's been wanting to talk to you. And she's like, I don't want to talk to him. I don't want to talk to him. She was just too scared, right? She was 8. And I said, no problem. We can just tell Grandpa to step back and that you are not ready to talk to him. And it's okay because I can tell you everything that he wants to say. He said he's very proud of you. You got an A on your math test. And she was like, how did you know? Yes, I did. That's great. And he wants to say he's so proud of you and you're so smart and he's really excited for you because you're going to do big things, kid. And my family friend had said that's exactly how he talked. It's like, that's really interesting. So he's here in the home. He's protecting the house. He's a protector. But I'm just going to ask him to step back and stop bothering her at night and to just allow the family to be and know that they are loved and supported by you. And if you want to stay here as a protector, are you okay with that? And my friend said, yes, absolutely. He's family and we love him. And, it actually is going to make my husband feel really good to know that his grandpa's here because he was his grandpa's favorite. I said, I just was about to say that I could hear that he's my favorite. And he wants to be here with you guys. Now, spirit can be in multiple places at once. So just because grandpa was with his grandson doesn't mean, and his great granddaughter, doesn't mean that he wasn't also visiting, other family members as well. So spirit is not bound by time and space like we are. They have the ability to be in multiple places multiple times, right? We have a 3D body, so we only can be in one place at one time. So the energy of him, there was a spirit in the house, but he was very loving. And after that, I also gave her a little candle to light in a very safe, like it was in a jar, and her mom would have to help her light the candle. And I said, when you light this candle, you invite the light and the angels to come in and fill the room, and your mom can blow out the candle after, or whatever. You just light it and ask the angels to come in and blow out the candle. So you don't want to have a candle light, lit all night, but that actually brings the light into the room and fills it with love and joy. And they started to do that, and she never had another nightmare again and slept through the night and no other issues with spirit. She actually grew out of her gift because she just wasn't ready for it. And as a child, I'll say that we're not really designed to be mediums, right? We don't have that higher functioning and opportunity to learn about some of the references that spirit might be using. So it was very cool when I went to clear that house because it wasn't a random spirit. It wasn't a spirit that had been there from the house previously. It was literally a loved one that was coming to just really excited to be part of life. So in that experience, with the energy imprinting of a house, we can sort of feel and understand that house energy is really important to clear out, right? Before you buy a house or you're going to be in and around a house that isn't yours. Just noticing, if you go to someone else's house and notice the energy of that house, it could be their energy, it could be the house energy from before them. But I highly recommend clearing energy out of houses before you take on the house as your own. Now, this one is sort of a little bit creepy, and I'm going to save more of the creepy ones for next week. But this one is a horror story about a spirit pushing a client because they were upset that she was in the house. And it's very, very interesting. So she called me as an ex-colleague that I used to work with and a friend, and she said, I think I need you. There's something in this house, and I just got pushed down the stairs. that's a little aggressive. So tell me what's happened. And she said, I just can feel all of a sudden there's something here. And I felt a hand on my back. Luckily, it was only a couple of stairs, but I got pushed. And she said, I'm not, like, something's here, Sheetal. Like, I need you to come. So I was, yeah, call my mom. I don't do that stuff. My mom does that stuff. I walk in the light. I'm not interested in dealing with anything that's kind of nefarious and any energy that's aggressive like that. So my mom came with me, and as soon as we pulled up to the house, I saw my client's father standing on the doorstep. He's in spirit. I do know that he had crossed into spirit, and he's standing there, and he's like, tell her she needs to clean up this house. I don't like that she's here. This house is not being kept up like I would have done it, because I didn't know this about her father, but as I mentioned it to her, I said, your dad actually was on the step meeting us, and he said that you have not been keeping up the maintenance here. If he was alive, he would have been fixing up floorboards, and he said there's a board that is loose in the back of the house, and it's very dangerous, and you haven't cleaned it up and fixed it. And she's like, oh my God, that's my dad. There's a deck board that keeps coming out. There's a board on the house that needs to be fixed. She was renting a townhouse, and the area, when I pulled up to this house, I was actually shocked, this townhouse, because I knew what she did for a living. She could afford a much better place than this, and it was a rundown, not a great area of town. I was quite surprised. So as we walked in, introduced my mom. My mom's a little East Indian lady, and she she got an Indian accent, and she brought out her, what we do first is we walk through the house first to get a feel of the energy, and then she'll light the sambrani and she'll do the prayers and clear out the house, the energy of the house. So as we're walking through the house, I'm very, very aware of a woman's spirit. And I'm like, this woman's spirit is not connected to you. And she's a little upset. She says you have something of hers. I said, have you bought something lately in an estate sale? And she looked at me with her eyes wide, and she's like, how did you know? And I said, the spirit is telling me you have her stuff. And it's showing me like it's a candle holder, and it's got jewels it's like wrought iron kind of patterning. And in the patterning is jewels. And the jewels, when you light the candle, kind of pick up the light of the candle and act sort of like a kaleidoscope, casting colors around the walls. But the jewels look kind of tacky. Like it feels like a Mother's Day present. And I said, oh my God. It was a Mother's Day present from her daughter when she was in elementary school. She's saying this is her Mother's Day present that you have, and she wants it back. And my friend's like, oh my God, I know what it is. And she went to the cabinet and she brought it out, and it was exactly as I described it. It was wrought iron, circle in the middle where you can put the candle, a big votive. And then there's these jewels in the lattice of the wrought iron around it that reflects the light when you light the candle. And she said, how did you know? And I said, well, how did you get this? Like, and why would you buy this? This is really tacky. And she's like, I wanted to help my friend out. My friend was having an estate sale for her mother. They, unfortunately, when the mother passed, she had more debt than she had money in the bank. So they were having an estate sale to try to sell everything off that they could to pay off the debt. They were going to be left with no money after everything was paid off. And so in order to support her friend, she bought this candle holder just as like a little thing, because she's like, everything else was not really my thing. I thought I could just buy this and, support my friend. And I said, okay, so in the future, if you ever buy anything from an estate sale, I want you to smudge it. So smudging means you're lighting sage and you're bringing the smoke to clear out whatever it is that you bought. Now, smudging is an indigenous ceremony and must be done with reverence, and there's a way to do that. So if you don't want to do that, or you don't want to look deeper into how to do that, then I would say just filling with white light, or just even setting the intention. Thank you, whoever owned this, and this is now mine. I declare it as mine, and just fill it all with white light. Even just intention that, or you could even just sprinkle a little bit of water on it and say, this is mine now. Thank you very much, whoever owned it. I now declare this to be mine. So you always want to give thanks to whoever owned it, and now declare that yours and send your energy through the thing. right? So even if this ring was inherited by somebody else, I would say then make sure you wash it, maybe put it in a saltwater bath, and then hold it with your energy and say, I declare this to be mine. Thank you to the previous owner, right? You're setting the intention that this belongs to me now. So I said to the lady, like, this doesn't belong to you. You heard the story that unfortunately now there's so much money that's owed that they're trying to, your daughter sold this to try to get money to pay off your debts. And she felt very, very sad because she had not managed her money properly. And then my mom and I kind of called in from spirit someone who dearly loved her to help her cross over and help her understand that this one was not hers. And her husband came forth from spirit and took her into the light, and we closed the door behind her. And so I said, would you understand that her husband was predeceased her? And she said, yes, it was my friend's last parent to go. Her husband had died 10 years before. I was like, oh my God, it's so beautiful that he came to help her to be in peace. This is okay. This doesn't belong to you anymore. And all of these things that were yours are now no longer yours. And you've given them as a gift to your children to try to liquidate and pay off your bills. And it's okay. Everything is going to work out just fine. So as we went through the house, all of this energy, as soon as it cleared, as soon as she walked into the light, we didn't even say anything. My mom was holding the space, and then she said, "Oh, the energy changed." As soon as they went into the light, and we closed the door behind her. So it was really interesting. We opened the door to spirit, and then we closed it behind her. And it's something that we've kind of learned how to do, and then we sealed the door shut, and we blew out the candle. So we went through the rest of the house to just see what else is going on. And we went into the basement, and I was like, oh, I do not like the energy down here. Something really yucky happened here. I feel like there's a lot of energy imprinted on the walls. I feel like there's a lot of people doing drugs down here, and I want to spray paint the walls. And she said, well, come over to this part. And there was another room that she had the door shut, opened the door and turned on the light, and there's spray paint all over the walls. I don't know why that's so hard to say. Spray paint all over the walls. And I was like, what are you doing here in this place? Like, really? Is this where you're living? And she said, yes, before I moved in here, it was a drug den, and they've since cleaned up all the other rooms, but this one, the landlord has to come back and clean it up, but he hasn't had time. Said he hasn't had time. And her father then reappeared beside her, and he said to me, she's lying. That's not true. That the guy has had plenty of time. She's been here for a long time. Tell her to move. So I said, well, Spirit's not allowed to tell you what to do, so I'm like, okay, just easy, I know, but he loved her so much. And that's something he would have said in real life, when she was, if he was alive, not real life, you know what I mean? So I said, how long have you lived in this house? And she's like, I've been here now for 3 years. I was like, 3 years? Woman, like, what? This spray paint has been here for 3 years? Do you understand this energy is still here, and it's in the basement, so it permeates up through your floorboards? Like, what are you doing here? So I said, okay, we need to go sit down. So my mom went around and cleared the house, and her and I had sat down and had a little counseling session. And I said, okay, tell me how much you're paying for rent on this place. So she told me. And I said, how come you haven't looked for something else? She said, I have. It's just like, everything has moved in here. And I said, so you're settling for good because you're scared to go for great? Like, you're settling actually for mediocre. This isn't even good. Like, I know I have this really strong feeling in my heart, and I feel like your dad is also telling me he's going to make it possible for you to move to a much better place for the same amount of money, if not maybe $100 more a month, which I know you can afford. And she's like, I can't afford another $100 for sure. I could. So I said, I want you to look. You're going to find something in the next month, and you're going to give notice. How much time do you need to give notice? She's like, well, because I've been there for a few years, I'm going month to month, so I just have to give 30 days notice. I said, you're going to give 30 days notice soon. You're going to find the place. Start looking. Keep your eyes open. You cannot settle for mediocre. And if you're settling for mediocre here, where else in your life are you settling for mediocre? And she's like, you're right. You're right. And within the week, she found another place. It was exactly about $100 more than what she was paying. And within a month, she was gone out of that place into a much better part of the city, so much happier. The energy coming into her life really, really shifted. So interesting, isn't it? So that concludes our stories, our horror stories from a psychic for this week. Stay tuned next week when I talk about possession. Wishing you a wonderful week ahead.
Thank you for joining me on this episode of the Story of Spirit podcast. I hope you have found inspiration, support, and practical insights to help you align with your soul-led purpose and live a life that sets your soul on fire. If you have enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe to the podcast, leave a review, and share it with a friend. Your support helps us to reach more listeners and continues to provide valuable content. I sincerely appreciate every share, and I know it is how most people find me. It is because caring people like you have shared me with them at the right and perfect time. For more resources, insights, and to connect with our community, please visit us at www.sheetalstory.com and follow us on Instagram at sheetalstory. Remember, your journey to a more aligned and vibrant life is just the beginning, and I am here to support you every step of the way. Until next time, stay aligned, stay inspired, and keep shining your beautiful light. This is Sheetal Story, signing off from the Story of Spirit podcast. Here's the legalese that's required by our lawyers. This podcast and the YouTube channel represents the opinions of Sheetal Story and her guests to the show. The content should not be taken as medical, psychological, or financial advice. This series is informational and entertainment purposes only. Because each person is so unique, please consult your healthcare professional, your mental health dream team, your financial advisor, or anyone else that's an expert in the field in where you are thinking of making big choices in your life.